We have for this year of 2023, my goodness, has just flown by, and we're about to enter into the last month, and we have agreed as a church family that we are reading through the Bible together on a reading plan, section from the Old Testament and the New Testament each week, and that I would, as the Lord gave liberty, preach from a passage that you've read during that week before. And so this morning we're back in the book of James into chapter 3. Of all the statements that are made in the Bible, the book of James probably has more to say about the tongue than any New Testament writer does. And matter of fact, he says that if you were to learn how to govern your tongue perfectly, that there's not anything that you couldn't do. But the truth is also that if you do not learn and to submit to the lordship of Jesus, your tongue and what you say, then you will not go very far in spiritual maturity. And the answer to controlling our tongue, I know that many times we think of that as silence, that we just don't say anything. There are times that we do bite our tongue and that we do keep our tongue. And what James does here is that he does something that in the New Testament and in the Hebrew mindset during the New Testament days, there was a literary device where it was very common for them. They would have emphasis to assign the guilt of something to a part of the body. So if you were to stab somebody with a knife, then you would say that your hand is evil. My hand has done this evil deed. My hand has caused this harm to come. And that's what James is doing with the tongue. He is speaking, but he is speaking beyond just what we say. It is an attitude of our heart, and the tongue is just simply a representative of the human depravity and of our wicked state and the evil that we're capable of doing. And it is not just what we don't say. That is not what he means whenever he's talking about the control of our tongue. Our tongue sometimes can do more harm whenever we keep silent. Sometimes silence is golden. If you had children in your household over this Thanksgiving weekend that you don't normally have children in your household every day, I'm sure you said, somebody said their favorite holiday lights were the taillights of their family as they pulled away. Maybe you have, after everybody went home and you heard the proverbial crickets chirping, maybe you did say silence is golden. But I'm here to say that sometimes silence is not golden. Silence is just plain old yellow. And it is sometimes cowardice for us not to speak. And so whenever we're talking about control of our tongue, certainly we have to speak truth in love and we have to speak appropriately. But we have been silent about some things that the world now has just assaulted our culture with. Your children are growing up and grandchildren are growing up in a culture that has already accepted that evolution is true and that evolution is fact. Evolution is a system of belief. You have to have you got to have more faith than I do to believe in evolution. You have to have faith to believe that evolution is true. But it has been so accepted by our culture that now it's like we have just given up the fight. No, I am here to say this morning there are times when we do need to speak out. And it is not just the church, it's not just the pastor, it's not just the staff. It is God's people that we speak into our culture. And there are times even now that things that don't even make common sense to us, like for a boy or a girl, a him or a her, to decide their pronouns or decide how they're going to identify, and that is beyond science and it is beyond genetics. We have come to a place where we have been silent too often, and we do need to speak out. But James tells us that there's an appropriate way of doing that. Sometimes we just don't say anything, and that's wrong. I'm reminded of the joke of the old farmer and his wife that went to the county fair. As they arrived there was a man there that was had a plane with an open cockpit, and he He had the pilot's seat in front and then 2 seats behind him in the open cockpit. And the old farmer said to his wife, I've always wanted to go up in one of those things. And so they approached him and found out it was $5 to go up. And he said, no, that's far too much money. Well, the man, the pilot reasoned in his mind, I'm not getting any business here. And this man apparently is a respected member of the community, an older man. And so if I can get him to fly, then others will see that and it'll eliminate some of the fear and maybe I'll conjure up some more business. And so he told the old farmer, he said, I tell you what, let me make a deal with you. You go up with me, and if you don't yell or scream, if you don't say a word, then this will be a free flight. You won't have to pay a thing. And so the farmer said, okay, we can do that. And so they loaded up, and the pilot took off with the farmer and his wife in the back. But that pilot did everything he could. I mean, he dove and he rolled and he went upside down and he multiplied the G-force and he did everything. And whenever he landed, as he was getting out of his seat and taking off his goggles and everything, he told the old farmer, he said, well, you did quite well and your flight is free. I'm a man of my word. And the farmer said, well, you know, it was pretty hard. I almost cried out one time when Ma fell out. There are times when it's just wrong not to say something. So James this morning is telling us, and we're going to hear how we need to surrender our tongue to the lordship of Jesus. So look there in James chapter 3 and begin in verse 1. James says, let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such we will incur a stricter judgment. That is a word. And a solemn word for our teachers, for anyone who speaks, because he's not only talking about false teachers here, he's talking about the positive side. My hat goes off to our school teachers and what they deal with in our culture every single day. And you can tell they're not in it for the money. You can tell that they're not in it for praise because they deal with adults as well. I've had many administrators and teachers to say, the kids are great. It's the adults that we have to deal with that are hard. But this is talking about within the church. If you are a teacher, I am grateful today to be able to say with confidence, we have some fantastic teachers. They pray about, they seek the Lord, they prepare. If you come to Sunday school, you're going to sit in a class, and I can say this about our teachers. They'll have prepared, and they will speak the word that is true to the Word of God. So I'm grateful for that. Verse 2, he says, for we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. Now, if we put the bit in the horse's mouth so that they will obey us, we direct their entire body as well. Look at the ships also, though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, and the very world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body and sets on fire the course of our lives, and is set on fire by hell. For every species of beasts and birds, of reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by the human race, but no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come both blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be this way. Does a fountain send out from the same opening both fresh and bitter water? Can a fig tree, my brethren, produce olives, or a vine produce figs? Or can salt water produce fresh? We go back to verse 8, and he says that no one can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil full of deadly poison. And certainly that is true outside of the grace of God and the lordship of Jesus in our life. What our tongues speak will etch upon our soul. And what our tongues say, that we have to learn that the only way to be victorious in the flesh is through the lordship of Jesus. So I want to just kind of go through how James writes this. He deals with different illustrations, and there are, as you walk through here, he deals with the power of the tongue. Your tongue has great power. Your tongue has great power to do good, and it's with your tongue that you can bless. I hope that over the Thanksgiving season that you used your tongue to bless your family and to bless the Lord in giving thanks to Him and to worship Him. But the tongue can also be full of evil. And there are times when our tongue can do more evil than our hands could ever accomplish. Proverbs chapter, and James, I love the book of James because it is so practical. It deals with wisdom of how to live our life. I would say that it is similar it is the New Testament Proverbs, so I'll read a lot of Proverbs today. Proverbs 18 and verse 21 talks about the evil that the tongue can do. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Paul was a scholar, and Paul dealt with things in a very scholarly way. You will read Paul, and you'll find where Paul talks about very lofty ideas, and he can put it forth a philosophical argument. James is just down to earth. He's so practical, and he deals with things that are common. So as you kind of walk through this passage, he uses 6 different illustrations from life to be able to understand the tongue. And now he's dealing with power. He deals with the power of the tongue is through the bit that we put in the horse's mouth, and through the rudder of the ship. He shows that we can have control, that we can hold back, but we can also guide and direct, and we can give direction to our lives because of our tongue and through our tongue. And so he deals with that. Our tongue speaks powerful words. You listen in a court case, and a judge has powerful words whenever he says, the jury has found you guilty and I sentence you to death. Think of what that means in the power of his words. But also, there are great examples. We're coming into a time of year when we are going to emphasize and pray for our international missionaries, and that God has placed a call on their life. There was the powerful words that were recorded, and this man gave his testimony. He had ascribed it and gave a date, April 21st in 1855 at 2 p.m. There was a man by the name of Edward Kimball, and that he spoke some words just to a common shoe salesman, and he asked the word, "Sir, are you a Christian?" And from that question, just that simple question, then that man began to wrestle with, and D.L. Moody, as we would know him, came to a point of conviction, and he was used around the world. He shook 2 continents for Jesus. So you'll never know. Just a simple question, just a simple word that is spoken. Certainly to the people that you have influence over, to your children or grandchildren or your parents or grandparents, certainly within your family, you need to speak those words of influence. You need to give those words of advice and those words of encouragement. But you never know how you affect people's lives that you just cross their path, that you may sit by them at lunch, or you may see them in a restaurant, or you may see them in a grocery store, and you just speak a word of kindness to them. Don't think that's not wasted. That's not just empty words whenever you speak words of kindness, because the Bible tells us to speak kindness to one another. You need to understand that God is going to use everything that we speak if we are under the lordship of Jesus. So verse 2, he goes on and he says it can be negative or positive. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man. You have the ability to be able to control your tongue, but then also you have the power to direct your life through that. And I'm not talking about just name it and claim it, or as one preacher I heard say, grab it and what did he say? Grab it, blab it and grab it. That's what he said. I'm not talking about that you just that we're the ones that give the blessing. It is that we have been blessed, and because of that, it just needs to overflow from us. If you ever go to a spring and you just see it bubbling up out of the ground, that's how life in Christ ought to be about us. And that comes through our words as well. Then the second thing, look in verses 5 and following. Because he moves from the power of the tongue and he goes to the problem that comes through the tongue. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, the very world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body. There's that literary device where the blame is placed upon the tongue and what it does. It sets on fire the course for our lives, and is set on fire by hell. For every species of being and bird and reptiles and creatures of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by the human race, but no one can tame the tongue. With the tongue we can destroy, or with the tongue we can destroy our own lives. I will say that within the history of churches, that probably more damage has been done through what people have said and with their tongue than all of the physical damage around the world that has been incurred on church buildings. This is not the church. This is just a building. The church is God's people. And I would say that most of the damage that has happened within the church has happened from some of the meanest people in the world in the church. That is a convicting reality for me. That we sometimes get so comfortable within our Christianity that we go from our faith and we go into the world and in the flesh and we speak rumors. Rumors, if you hear a rumor, let it die with you. Don't pass it on, because there has been more damage that has been done to people's reputation, but to people's spirit, because God's people couldn't keep their mouths shut. And they allowed rumors, and you can read all through the New Testament, they deal with that. James illustrates it as a fire, and we know the damage that can come from the fire, from a wild beast. Proverbs 26 and verse 20 says, "For lack of wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no whisper, contentions quiet down." That is the most dangerous combination in the world, is a person who is not right with God but has loose lips. When you lose your mind, usually the first screw that goes wrong is the screw that controls your jaw. And I believe that God means for his people to speak truth and to be encouragers. If you hear a rumor and you're going to speak, then you ask yourself, do I know this to be true? And is this going to edify anyone? And does this bring glory to God? And if it doesn't, then let it die with you. I appreciate how James says in verse 5, "See how great a forest is set aflame, and it's just a small fire." There's just too many people that have a high opinion of their high opinion, and that they speak into everybody else's life, but they're not willing to submit their tongue to the Lord. Verse 8, he says it's a restless evil and full of deadly poison. And that word is venom. It's a picture of a snake. I know it's gotten cooler, but as I get out and kind of wandering around, listen, I'm not afraid of a lot of things, but one thing I have developed a fear for is heights. Somebody 6'5", you'd think that wouldn't be a problem, would you? But I don't like heights, and so let me say, a week from Friday, isn't it a week from Friday the poinsettias going to get here? This Friday. They're coming this Friday. Y'all know that these poinsettias just magically jump off the truck and run in here and set themselves up. You know that? No, they don't. There has to be somebody here that unloads them. So Friday morning, about 8 o'clock, if you'd like to come and help, because normally that has fallen upon the staff. And now Miss Thea Kay and Miss Melissa are gone, and and I made them do all the work. So now I'm looking at who I can. But one of the things I realized, we're not putting the poinsettias up here this year. We're going to have something different up here. But we've normally put up the platform and put up the tree, and it is all that I could do to stand on top of the ladder and reach that top one. So, and I've realized I'm afraid of heights. So I will confess to you, if somebody else doesn't do it, there ain't going to be a poinsettia on top of the tree any longer, because I'm not doing that anymore. I'm afraid of heights. But there are a lot of things that we ought to be afraid of, not heights. Or one of them is snakes. I am, as a little boy said, I'm scared of snakes. I am afraid of snakes. So even during the cool weather, I know you think that I would know better, but when I walk around, I look for snakes. I'm set. I can't run right now, but I'll die trying if I see a snake. I don't like snakes. Why does that fear not translate into the venom that sometimes we let flow out of our mouth? That's what James is saying. It is so practical. Let's look at the purpose of the tongue. James 3 and verse 9. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men. That word curse, he's not talking about that we cuss one another out. You don't have to talk ugly and still curse somebody. And then he uses two illustrations for this, the fountain of water and then the fruit tree. And sometimes we are in total contradiction. Sometimes we bless God and sometimes we curse men. God has given us a couple of reasons why we can speak. I know you go to see Dr. Doolittle and you hear the animals talk, and that's all fun. My daddy tickled me because the movie Babe, about the little pig that could talk, and my daddy wouldn't watch it because he raised hogs before. It just kind of freaked my daddy out to watch a pig talk. But they can't. Pigs don't talk. Animals don't talk. They make sounds and they communicate, but they don't talk. No, Victor, Butterbean does not talk. Animals don't talk. Now, I had the smartest dog in the world, and she could sing, she could play the piano, but she couldn't talk. You can talk. Why? God has placed upon us, we are created in that image bearer. We are created in the image of God. And part of that is that we can speak. Now, why can we speak? To glorify God, to praise God. That's why we encourage you, whenever we're singing in our worship service, sing. I don't care. We don't worried about whether you come out with all the right notes and the right timing. We want you to sing glory to God. We want you to give your heart and lift it up and praise God. Listen to the words that you're singing and the message that you sing. But when you're going down the road, turn the radio, sing with the radio if you're listening to Christian music, but turn the radio off and just start thanking God and praising God for who He is and what He's done. You're given the ability to speak for that purpose, to praise God. But also, you are given the ability to speak to edify others and to build up others, to know Christ and to make Him known. So what he says here, it should not be a contradiction that we will speak blessing to God and then curse someone else. That we're discouragement to everybody else, but we praise God. That should not be. That we ought to look the same way that we praise God ought to be the same attitude that we encourage each other with. So he does tell us that we ought to do that. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 8 says, you're a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that, and he's not talking about Israel here, he's talking about the church, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who has called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. Praise God. Tell others of what God has done in your life. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 15 says, through him then let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God. That is the fruit of lips that give thanks to his name. And do not neglect doing good and sharing for with such sacrifices God is pleased. You are called to praise God, and you are called to build other people up. My Uncle Curtis, my daddy actually had 4 sisters, and one died as a child, and so he had 3 sisters, and they all thought that it was a sin if the air was not filled with the melodious sound of their voice. And they all talked at the same time, and they disagreed about everything, and it kind of would depend upon what one of them would say if the other was going to choose whether they're going to believe the same thing or not. And if she said 1 + 1 = 2, then another one of my aunts would have said, no, 2 - 1 = 1. And, you know, they could say the same thing and be in an argument. And and my Aunt Frances was the youngest one, so she not only argued with the other 2, but she kind of ran everything, and she told everybody what they ought to be doing. And my Uncle Curtis was the most meek and mild person that you'll ever know. I remember going as just a little bitty fellow. We went to visit them. They lived at that time up in Joliet, Illinois. And we went to church with them, and I was sitting between my Uncle Curtis and my daddy. And I remember, I probably would not have remembered the preacher saying it if my uncle hadn't said what he said. But apparently the preacher said that if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say anything at all. And my Uncle Curtis looked down at me and said, that's why I'm so quiet. And he was. But you need to make that a conscious thought, that we bless God, we ought to bless each other too. Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6 says, let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each other. Let me just simply close this morning as James gives us these practical illustrations of what we can do with our tongue, with 7 realities to tame the tongue. These are 7 things that you can do to tame your tongue. First of all, recognize the wild nature of your tongue. It's like a fire that burns out of control. One fella said that he was, as a little boy, he was watching TV, and a commercial came on. Used to, they had Smokey the Bear. Some of you older folks like me remember when Smokey Bear came on the 1 or 2 channels that you got. And Smokey Bear would say the message was, only you can prevent forest fires. And he said, as a little boy, he said, and I took that personally, and said, only me? I'm the only one who can prevent forest fires? And got overwhelmed by that. I'm here to tell you this morning, only you, under the lordship of Jesus, can prevent setting your forest on fire. Only you. So first of all, you got to recognize the wild nature of your tongue. Second of all, recognize the destructive power of your tongue. Be careful. Proverbs 16 verse 27 says, a worthless man digs up evil while his words are like scorching fire. A perverse man spreads strife, and a slanderer separates intimate friends. It will destroy a family, a church, a person. Thirdly, recognize the healing power that you have in your tongue. Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 18 says, there is one who speaks rashly like the thrust of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. I hope what we can be known for, because the church ought to be a hospital. It ought to be a place where people come who are hurting, and that they find praise of God, but they also find encouragement and love and tenderness and kindness and forgiveness. They ought to see the fruit of the Spirit lived out in who we are. And one way we do that is through our tongue. But also recognize the connection between what you think and what you speak. Sometimes it's not best. My aunts would say, let me give you a piece of my mind. They didn't have enough to spare. Most people don't. So just recognize that there needs to be a filter. There needs to be a filter. And that filter needs to be the Holy Spirit, not just common sense. Philippians chapter 4 verse 8 says, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, what is of good repute, if there is any excellence, if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. A wise man will allow his heart to dwell on being renewed, as Romans 12 says, the renewal of our mind, to dwell on the Word of God, to dwell on that which is positive, rather than dwell on those things that are negative. I hope that my memory fails me about all the evil things. Because I hear a lot of evil things. And I sit and counsel and know a lot of things that happens that brings a lot of hurt. And God has given me, He's gifted me with that loss of memory. That's not what I think of. If I know some hurt in you, that's not what I think of when I see you. That's not the first thing that comes to my mind. I don't even think about it. And I have to, even if it comes back and that there's further help that needs to be given, I have to be reminded of that. And I pray that that continues. I pray that I have that loss of memory of all those negative things, because God is too good to us. And He blesses us, and He heals us, and He restores us, and He sets us on a path so that we can glorify His name. Not that we have to walk in the guilt of our sin. Jesus took the guilt of my sin. And I don't have to go back and dwell on all the things that I've ever done wrong. I can dwell on the grace of God and the goodness of God and to see Him every day. I do not have to be defeated, and I do not have to be the one who defeats others by only allowing. Because if I dwell on those things and that's what I think about, then it's going to come out. Because out of the heart comes the issues of the mouth, of the tongue. There's a fivefold test. Think before you speak. If somebody comes up and they say something to you and you're going to repeat something, you're going to say something, think of these things. T, is this true? H, is this helpful? I, is this inspiring? Do I encourage others by this? N, does this need to be said? And K, is it kind? If you'll kind of go through that, you'll lose interest in spreading the rumor, spreading the gossip, saying those things. Number 5, not only is your tongue have the capability with a wild nature and to be able to have destructive power, have healing power, think before you speak and let it have that power, but also recognize that connection between the heart and your speech. Matthew 12 and verse 34, it says, for from the mouth speaks out of that which is filled in the heart. The good man brings out of the good treasure what is good, and the evil man brings out of his evil treasure what is evil. But I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they will give an accounting for in the day of judgment. Sometimes people say something mean. They say, I don't know why I said that. I do. I know why I say mean things, because it's in my heart. And I let it come through my mouth. That doesn't glorify God. The 6th thing, recognize the value of restraining your speech. Proverbs chapter 21 and verse 23, he who guards his mouth and his tongue guards the soul from trouble. Sometimes the smartest thing in the world that you can say is nothing at all. Closed, what is it? A rolling stone gathers no moss. Well, a closed mouth gathers no feet. Sometimes the only time I open my mouth, it seems like, is so I can swap feet. I put my foot in my mouth all the time. And sometimes it's just better to regard and let it stay in my heart. The last thing is to recognize your need to surrender the control of your tongue to Jesus. Maybe you're here this morning and you don't know Jesus. You've never come to a personal relationship with Him. Today He calls you. But maybe as a believer, He comes to you today and says, I want you and I want all of you. And the best thing you can give Him today is your tongue. Psalm 19 and verse 14 says, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock, and my redeemer. Let's pray. Father, I do thank you that you are our rock. You are our redeemer.